Okay, so get this. Bitcoin, yeah, the cryptocurrency, everyone and their grandma seems to have an opinion on. Well, it's quietly hitting these crazy transaction volumes. Like even PayPal's a little jealous.
Interesting.
You'd think something with a reputation for, well, being linked to some shady stuff would be a bit more under the radar. But you sent over some seriously interesting research on this, so I'm ready to dive in.
Yeah, let's dive in.
What is it about Bitcoin that lets it kind of walk this line between being this like everyday money tool and, well, let's just say not so legal activities?
It really is a fascinating paradox, isn't it? That's something we definitely need to unpack.
For sure. It's like that band, right? Everyone has a few of their songs on their playlist, but nobody knows how they got there.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, how about a little Bitcoin 101? Explain it like I'm, I don't know, someone who still uses those paper checks.
Okay, so imagine a currency that exists completely online, right? No physical bills or coins. And here's the kicker. It's completely independent of any government or bank. It's decentralized, run by a network of users.
So it's like the Wild West, but instead of saloons and tumbleweeds, it's all ones and zeros.
You got it. Encryption keys, digital wallets, that's the name of the game in the world of Bitcoin.
Digital gold rush, huh? So Bitcoin, we got it. But what about all the other cryptocurrencies out there? Ethereum, Litecoin, Dogecoin. Are we just talking about different flavors of the same digital dollar?
That's a great question. A lot of people wonder about that. So you can think of Bitcoin as the original, the classic Ferrari, if you will. Litecoin, that's more like your Lamborghini.
Okay, I'm following.
Similar concept, similar purpose to be a digital currency, but each with its own quirks, its own little advantages. But they all kind of owe their existence to this mysterious figure, Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yes. Bitcoin's elusive creator, the Banksy of the digital world.
Exactly. Drop this bombshell on the world and then, poof, vanish without a trace.
A true enigma. Okay, so we've got this revolutionary tech, shrouded in secrecy, a little bit edgy. But let's put aside those dark web stories for just a second. For regular people, everyday transactions, is it actually useful?
That's where things get really interesting. Since Bitcoin bypasses those traditional middlemen, like banks, transactions can be incredibly fast and way cheaper. You know those credit card fees, the ones that can really take a chunk out of your purchase?
Ugh, don't remind me.
Sometimes like 2-5%. Bitcoin has the potential to cut that down to like 1%.
Now that's what I'm talking about, putting some money back in our pockets.
Right. And it's not just individuals who benefit. Businesses, they see the potential too. Some experts are even saying the U.S. could be on the verge of a Bitcoin boom, like Silicon Valley, but for digital currency. We're talking trillions of dollars here.
Trillions. Wow. It does feel like we're in those early days of the internet, doesn't it? Nobody quite gets it, but everyone knows it's a big deal. But let's be real. Every exciting new tech has a flip side. What's the catch with Bitcoin?
You're absolutely right. Every revolution has its bumps in the road. And Bitcoin, well, Bitcoin's no different. I think it's time we talk about the elephant in the room. Or, should I say, the Silk Road in the digital marketplace.
Right. Our listeners are smart. We all know Bitcoin's got a little bit of a reputation. So let's talk about regulation. Where does Bitcoin stand legally?
Honestly.
Yeah.
It's about as clear as mud. On the one hand, you've got FinCEN saying, nope, not a real currency. But then a U.S. district court judge comes in and says the exact opposite. It's a real mess. Nobody seems to agree on the rules of the game.
So it's like trying to play Monopoly where the rules change every 5 minutes.
Pretty much. It creates a lot of uncertainty, makes it tough for businesses, and frankly scares away a lot of everyday folks who just want to understand what this whole Bitcoin thing is about.
So what are the risks of?
Well, for starters, the value of Bitcoin is anything but stable. One day it's up, the next it's down. It's a roller coaster, and not everyone has the stomach for it. And then there's security. Now, the technology behind Bitcoin, the blockchain, that's incredibly secure, but the platforms where people store and trade it.
I see where you're going with this.
It's like having Fort Knox guarding a cardboard box. The security is only as strong as the weakest link. Hackers know this. And to make matters worse, if someone makes off with your Bitcoin, good luck getting it back. Consumer protection, practically non-existent. Remember, it's the Wild West out there.
Okay, high stakes, no safety net. I get why some people are hesitant. But in the middle of all this chaos, there have to be some voices of reason, right? Some people trying to bring some order to this digital frontier.
Oh, absolutely. There are definitely different groups all vying to shape the future of Bitcoin, each with their own ideas about how to regulate it.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were trying to untangle this whole web of Bitcoin regulations, or the lack thereof, I guess.
It's a tangled web for sure.
So who are the major players trying to wrangle this digital stallion?
Well, I wouldn't say wrangle. It's more about striking that balance, isn't it?
I mean, that middle ground.
Exactly. You've got folks like Senator Schumer and Manchin. They're pretty vocal about, Bitcoin's connection to those not-so-legal marketplaces, like Silk Road, for example.
Right.
They want stricter rules, tighter oversight, basically putting Bitcoin in a nice, neat little box.
And on the other side of the ring,
you've got the Justice Department.
Yeah.
They're acknowledging that Bitcoin has its legitimate uses, too.
Yeah.
They seem to be advocating for a more, nuanced approach.
Okay.
And then you've got the Bitcoin Foundation.
Right.
This group of, developers and advocates. They're really pushing for regulations that won't stifle innovation. They're worried that if things get too strict, it'll crush Bitcoin before it even has a chance to really take off.
So we've got cautious lawmakers, the pragmatic regulators, and then the innovators raring to go. Sounds like the setup for a classic Western showdown. But let's get down to brass tacks here. What kind of concrete solutions are on the table?
This is where your research gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
One of the big ones is actually giving Bitcoin a clear legal definition.
Makes sense.
Finally settle the debate. What is Bitcoin in the eyes of U.S. law?
No more gray areas.
Exactly. And they're proposing we could draw parallels with existing regulations, like credit cards, for instance.
Ah, so kind of adapt the existing framework rather than reinvent the wheel.
Precisely. They say treat those Bitcoin wallets and exchanges like we treat Visa and MasterCard.
I like it. Familiar territory. So what else?
Another big one. Involve the Bitcoin folks themselves in the process.
You mean like actually get the experts in the room?
Exactly. The Bitcoin Foundation, let those guys have a seat at the table. Because really, how can you regulate something you don't fully understand, right?
Couldn't agree more.
They also talk about streamlining that whole licensing process for Bitcoin businesses.
Right, because right now it's a bit of a...
It's a nightmare. Expensive, convoluted. It really discourages legitimate businesses and just slows down everything.
Red tape, enemy number one. What else? Consumer protection. Gotta be a big one.
Absolutely. There's a proposal to offer some safeguards for those online Bitcoin wallets. Maybe we can tack some amendments onto existing laws, like the Electronic Funds Transfer Act, for example.
So there's some recourse if, God forbid, someone's digital nest egg gets swiped.
Exactly. Can't forget about everyone's favorite topic, though. Taxes.
Oh, yes. Taxes. The one constant, even in the digital Wild West.
Right. And they actually bring up Germany's approach here, which I found interesting. They essentially tax Bitcoin transactions like capital gains when you trade it for, regular money.
Okay.
And apply sales tax when you're buying, groceries or whatever with it. But here's the kicker. They also make a case for not taxing Bitcoin miners.
Whoa, back up. No taxes for the digital gold miners. How does that work?
It's an interesting argument. They say because the U.S. government doesn't really own the unmined Bitcoin.
Right.
Taxing those miners, it's almost like trying to tax a foreign country's oil wells, for example.
It's outside their jurisdiction.
Exactly. Plus, they argue that taxing miners would just send them packing to friendlier shores.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't be great for the U.S. economy, right? And it could potentially make the whole Bitcoin network more vulnerable.
Interesting. Okay, so finding that balance is key here. We want to encourage growth, but also prevent total chaos. Speaking of chaos, what about Bitcoin's role in, let's just say, those less than legal activities we discussed earlier? Any solutions for that?
That's where it gets really fascinating. One of the sources, they make this really compelling argument that Bitcoin's transparency, the fact that every transaction is recorded
on the blockchain,
could actually make it easier to track illegal activity than, good old-fashioned cash.
Wait a minute. So the very thing that some people find appealing about Bitcoin, its anonymity, could be its downfall.
It's definitely a possibility.
And we're back for the final stretch of our Bitcoin deep dive.
The home stretch.
We've talked about its potential, the risks, this whole regulatory balancing act. But right before the break, you dropped a bit of a bombshell.
Oh, yeah.
Could Bitcoin, with its, let's say, reputation for anonymity, actually become a tool to fight financial crime?
It's funny how that works out sometimes. So it's one of those plot twists that makes this whole space so interesting to follow. See, when you use cash, those transactions, they vanish. Poof, gone. But with Bitcoin, Every single transaction, it leaves a permanent mark.
All thanks to the blockchain.
Exactly. That blockchain, it's like this giant public ledger in the sky. Every Bitcoin transaction ever recorded there for anyone to see. Think about that. If authorities want to trace, say, some kind of money laundering scheme with traditional currency, good luck. It's like trying to track grains of sand on a beach. But with Bitcoin,
Yeah.
that trail is crystal clear.
So instead of those shady deals going down in some dark alley, it's all
Valley open.
for the whole world to see.
Precisely. Law enforcement, researchers, data analysts, even journalists. We could be headed toward a future where these elaborate schemes are exposed in real time. Corruption, way harder to hide. Transparency becomes the norm.
Now that's something I can get behind. More transparency, less opportunity for the bad guys to, well, be bad guys.
Exactly. And don't forget that idea we touched on earlier about the Federal Reserve potentially holding Bitcoin reserves. Some experts believe that could be a game changer in terms of stabilizing Bitcoin's value.
So the very institution that Bitcoin was designed to sort of circumvent the Fed could hold the key to its mainstream acceptance. It's a crazy world, isn't it?
That's Bitcoin for you. It's full of surprises.
Yeah. It really does feel like we're just at the beginning of this whole Bitcoin saga. So much potential for disruption, for empowering individuals.
Who knows what the future holds, right?
Who knows? But the choices we make right now about regulation, adoption, how we balance innovation, and of course security, those choices will determine what that future looks like. So for you, our listeners, you've just completed your crash course on Bitcoin. You've peeked behind the curtain. You've heard about the potential, the risks, the whole shebang. Now it's up to you to decide what you make of it all. As we venture deeper into this world of digital currencies, one question remains. Will Bitcoin, a technology born in the shadowy corners of the internet, emerge as a force for good in the global financial system? It's a question worth pondering. And on that note, we'll leave you to do just that. This has been The Deep Dive. Until next time.